scientists should be militant atheists. That was the headline that I read in an article in the New Yorker, and it caught my attention. All scientists should be militant atheists. The article was written by a theoretical physicist, one of the smart guys named Lawrence Krauss. He's also an outspoken atheist. So I had to read the article, and here's what it said. It said this commitment to open questioning is deeply tied to the fact that science is an atheistic enterprise. He goes on to say, it's ironic, really, that so many people are fixated on the relationship between science and religion. Basically, there isn't one. Yeah. He says, it's inevitable that it, speaking about science, draws people away from religion. And by religion, he means belief in God. He means Christianity. Is that true? This right here is a lie. It's a lie. And as Christians, we need to dig in our heels and stand for truth. And let me tell you what's true. Science and faith are completely compatible. In fact, a proper understanding of faith and science should actually draw people towards God, not away from Him. Let me prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in our time together. Let's start with the word faith. You see, over time, words have a tendency of changing their meanings. In fact, some words have come to mean the exact opposite of what they used to mean. For example, consider the word awful. A century ago, the word awful meant to be full of awe. So you could testify to an awful sunset, and that would be communicating reverence for the event. But I didn't wake up this morning, turn to my wife and say, honey, you look awful. That would be a bad idea. Some of the husbands here are writing that down. They're taking notes. Yeah, don't call my wife awful. Okay. No, because the word has changed its meaning. Today, it means extremely unpleasant or distasteful. Well, what about the word faith? How many of you here have seen Miracle on 34th Street? How many of you have seen the black and white version of Miracle on 34th Street? Okay, awesome. I want you to listen carefully at how the mother describes faith.
You couldn't get it because you're not Santa Claus, that's why. You're just a nice old man with whiskers, like my mother said. And I shouldn't have believed you.
I was wrong when I told you that, Susie. You must believe in Mr. Kringle and keep right on doing it. You must have faith in him.
But he didn't get me that doesn't make sense, Mommy.
Faith is believing in things when common sense tells you not to.
Huh?
Yeah, I think that was in the original too. Did you catch what she said? She said, faith is believing in things when common sense tells you not to. And that's the definition that our culture is working from. It's blind faith. In fact, Richard Dawkins, a very famous atheist, he wrote a book called The God Delusion, where he argued if you believe in God, you're delusional. And in the book, he says that faith is persistent, false belief held in the face of strong contradictory evidence. So you have all this contradictory evidence saying one thing, but you believe the other. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like on opposite ends of the spectrum. On one end, you have science. That's when you have lots of evidence. That's when you have rational thinking. But on the other end of the spectrum, well, that's just wishful thinking. That's when you have no evidence, okay? And that amounts to blind faith. The question is biblical faith blind faith? And I think if you want to know what the Bible teaches on the word faith, it might be a good idea to consult the Bible. Okay, so let's go to the Bible. I'll just show you one passage to make my point. If you go to the end of the Gospel of John, John tells us why he wrote his gospel. If you read the Gospel of Luke, he says just right up front in the first page. But you have to go to John chapter 20 to find out why John wrote. And here's what he says. He says, now Jesus did many other signs, miracles, wonders, in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written. Okay, here's going to tell us. Okay, why'd you write, John? So that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Do you see what happened there? John provides eyewitness, evidence, testimony, so that people would know that Jesus is the Christ. Does that sound like John believed in blind faith? No. Was John's idea of faith against the evidence? Of course not. The existence of his gospel was to provide evidence for you and I, so we would read the evidence and believe. Now, of course, biblical faith isn't blind faith, but is there any evidence out there to strengthen or embolden our faith? And I think there is. I think there's plenty of it. In fact, you come to my lab tomorrow, you'll see that there's tons of that evidence out there. I just want to give you one very briefly right now. It has to do with the origin of the universe, the beginning of the universe. In short, the beginning of the universe implies a beginner of the universe. All right. Well, I know you guys are out of school. It's summer vacation. But I want you to stay with me here. This is going to be fun. How many here like science? Okay, great. In your high school science class, you would learn that visible light, like the light shining on me right now, is made up of all the different colors of the rainbow, the color spectrum. And red light has a longer wavelength than the other end, the blue or violet end, which has a shorter wavelength. That's important. Here's one more thing you need to know. These waves, light waves, or even sound waves, they can be compressed or stretched out if the source of the wave is moving. So if you've ever seen a race car or watched on TV or seen a car go by and it sounds like this. Okay, I'm going to do that again for you in case some of you missed it, okay? What happened there? As the car comes towards you, the waves are being compressed. And as the car passes, the waves are now being stretched out. Well, something really cool was discovered. When we look out at the night sky, at the galaxies in the universe, and there are billions of galaxies in our universe, what we find is the galaxies are red shifted. What does that mean? The light coming from the galaxies is actually shifted to the red end of the spectrum, telling us that those galaxies are all moving away from us. In fact, space itself is being stretched out. I read that somewhere in the Bible, by the way. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, what does this mean? Well, scientists take this to mean that the entire universe is actually expanding as I'm speaking. We just had a couple scientists up here blowing balloons, right? Or wannabe scientists. And as you consider the universe as a balloon with buttons on it, and the buttons represent galaxies. Now, don't pin the buttons to the balloon. This isn't going to work, okay? So you have the buttons on, and as you blow it up, the galaxies all get further and further and further away from each other. But I want you to think about this in reverse. Like yesterday, the universe was smaller. And the day before that, the universe was smaller. And last year, it was smaller still. In fact, if you go back far enough, what you find is that space had a beginning. There was a time when there was no space. In fact, no space. Einstein said that space and time are actually related. There was a point when there was no time. No space and no time. No matter and no energy. Of course, you couldn't put the matter anywhere if there was no space, right? There was a beginning. There was a point when there was absolutely nothing physical. This gets me excited because this sounds strangely like a supernatural cause. In fact, what could bring time, space, matter, and energy into existence? Maybe a cause that's timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and extremely powerful. In fact, these are just the attributes that we give to God. And notice we didn't open up our Bibles to do systematic theology here to get those attributes. We could have done that. But it seems like the heavens are declaring the glory of God. Now, it is no surprise that a very famous astronomer named Robert Jastrow, he was agnostic, which means he didn't know whether God exists or not. But he wrote a book called God and the Astronomers. Listen to what he says. He says, for the scientist who has lived in his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Because what have theologians been saying for centuries? That modern scientists, 20th and 21st century scientists, are just getting on the same page. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There has never been, that's cool. That's cool. This is exciting. In all of human history, it's never been a more exciting time to be both a Christian and a scientist. You see, science and faith are not at odds. That is a lie. The truth that we can stand on is that biblical faith is based on evidence. Faith isn't blind, and science isn't bad, okay? Science isn't our enemy. It's our ally. The God who reveals himself in his word is the same God who reveals himself in the world that we study. In fact, God is the author of both. Thank you.